On today's show, if there's a goalie available, Steve Staios has called. We'll get you the latest from the rumor mill and which other teams are the competition for acquiring a top goalie.
And we continue our 2024 NHL Draft Prospect Profiles with 3 forwards, including 2 of the best power forwards in the draft.
And a 5-star guy for me. If you're not going to give one, I will. That and more on today's Locked On Sens.
I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you are listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory, while Brandon Piller is up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the official sports betting partner of Locked On. FanDuel, where you can go right now and get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. You can also follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram, and please subscribe to the podcast wherever you get yours, also available on YouTube. Today is Monday, June 10th, and Pilsy, will the Ottawa Senators have a new goalie? It's an age-old question. We discussed a ton last week, but every time there's an update, it feels like the Sens are in on another potentially available goaltender.
Yeah, for Sens fans that think that this team is comfortable running it back with Anton Forsberg and Jonas Korpisalo, I think Steve Staios has made it very clear that he is anything but comfortable with doing that. Anytime a single goalie is mentioned in trades, you hear these people are going for it, these people are going for it. Oh yeah, and the Sens too, obviously.
The latest, and we discussed Jacob Markstrom a little bit last week, but our pal Bruce Garriock over with the Sun, his latest says that the Senators have been, quote, one of the most aggressive teams chasing the Flames netminder. We've already talked ad nauseum about the connections that Markstrom has to Travis Green and ultimately, I guess, Nolan Baumgartner too, but yep. Travis Green, more importantly, being his goalie in Utica and then in Vancouver. So there's some familiarity there. There's some familiarity of a guy who it seems like could get back to his elite self. The last 2 years, though, have not been that, which is why, one, this is leading the show because it sounds like the Flames are expecting to get a haul in exchange for Jacob Markstrom. Does that change your opinion on acquiring a 34-year-old goaltender? Like, how much would you realistically pay for that? And I'm thinking there's no way you're offloading Korpisalo's deal in this trade. That would have to be done separately.
Yeah, I don't think Korpisalo can be attached to any trades for a goalie coming back in my mind. Like the Senators, I think, would have to retain salary and add a sweetener to get Korpisalo off the books. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to have to deal with him separately, like you mentioned. Ross, I think any trade with a goalie starts with Jacob Chychrun as the main piece for the Ottawa Senators. And then, like I said, it's so hard to decide what proper trades are going to be, especially for goalies. Like sometimes goalie trades are realistic, and then other times you feel like goalies go for super cheap. Like, didn't Marc-Andre Fleury won the Vezina, and then didn't he get traded for a 5th round pick or something?
Wait, no, that might have been the Vegas thing.
Yeah, but still, like, and then Ullmark is a Vezina winning guy, and Boston's like, we're probably going to move on from you. And they looked at trading him at the deadline. So the value of goalies is so convoluted. It's almost impossible to make mock trades. So I'm not going to get too deep into that. But I do think if you're the Ottawa Senators, you're going to have to move some money off the books. So Jacob Chychrun's 4.6 is probably right around the dollar amount you're looking for a goalie, maybe a little bit more for a goalie. So you got to have him just in as far as moving money and starting with value goes. And then, unfortunately, Ross, I think the 25th overall pick is going to have to be in play if the Ottawa Senators are going to want a goalie, because there's no blue chip prospects really that the Ottawa Senators have, unless you're looking at guys like Shane Pinto, who I would not consider a prospect anymore, full-time NHLer, obviously, or Ridley Gregg. I don't think Tyler Clevin would be involved in any of these deals. So then you're looking down the list and you're looking at guys like maybe Roby Yarventi, maybe a Zach Ostapchuk, guys like that who could have some interest from general managers around the league.
Bruce Garriock, and of course, you can read the full article at the Sun Citizen, where he was saying the Flames are looking for a piece or a package that would include a first-round pick and a high-end young prospect. That's a pretty high price to pay. Now, we know that Igor Sokolov's name was attached to the Calgary Flames around the trade deadline. The Senators ultimately deciding to keep Socko, trying to get that Belleville Sens playoff push. And wow, what a run it was at the end of the season to sneak in and then win that series over the Toronto Marlies. But I'm not saying he's going to be a humongous piece in a Markstrom trade, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finds his way to Calgary one way or another this offseason. They could also just not qualify him after the Stanley Cup Finals. I hope he gets qualified, but we will see on that. Billsy, does this change the Korpisalo narrative at all? Because the Senators, they're not in on the goaltenders that are going to be making $2-3 million that would have been almost like, okay, you get Forsberg off the books and here you go. They're not being rumored to be attached with those names. These are the $6 million guys. Markstrom with 2 years left at $6 million, Ullmark with 1 year left. And to me, it's like, if you think you're going to get one of these guys, Korpisalo can't be on the books. So is a buyout more likely that the names coming out are the ones that would be even higher salary than he made last year?
It's definitely possible, Ross, because if you're the Ottawa Senators, we've talked about it. There are quite a few holes to fill in this lineup. So you don't want to go into next season with possibly $10 million in goaltending. However, I do feel like the Sens are looking at that Korpisalo contract and saying, we got to give him one more shot to be better. Because if you look at a Korpisalo buyout, Ross, which I imagine you're doing right now, when does that buyout end? 2030?
Yeah, but I think you have to worry less about that. Look, the cap just went up an extra $300K. It's just going to keep rising that way. I almost think you have to only look a little more short-sighted. To answer your question, it ends in 2031-32. So it's an 8-year buyout. It's brutal to think like that. But if you're trying to compete this year and next year, those are the two most important years. The cap hit this year would take it from $4 million to $333,000.
Yeah.
You're basically opening up $3.6 million to play around with this year, and then you're opening $3.1 some million next year. Sure, there's a bit on the back end, 1.8, then 2.3, then 1.33 for the final 4 years. But by then, you're hoping that that's the equivalent of like an entry-level contract. So I think that he was that bad last year. You saw the stat in the Stanley Cup Finals. Oh, wow, Edmonton's allowed a goal on the first shot like 11 times this year. It's like 11 times. We call that January. Like, this is wild. So I think that they made a huge mistake on the Korpisalo signing. I thought that his fixed hips would, salsa all around the crease, but he just looks too, I almost want to say too athletic, where like he's just diving all over the place. And when he doesn't get the puck, it looks ridiculous. And I just don't think he's the kind of goalie that's going to give you a lot of confidence. Now, is a guy like Jacob Markstrom coming off the worst year of his career and getting older, is he the answer? I don't know. But I just know you cannot run it back with Korpisalo and Forsberg.
Yeah, definitely we're in agreement on that. I think the only issue here, Ross, is the Senators are going in aggressively for these goalies, but they're going to get outbid. Like we made a list of other teams that are looking at goalies, Ross, and you can run through those in a second. But the issue is there's so many teams that are coveting a prime number one goalie, and all of those teams have more assets and shinier futures to lure those players to their respective cities than the Ottawa Senators do. So if the Senators are going to make a push for a star goalie, they're going to have to overpay massively, which they can't afford to do.
Sounds like the New Jersey Devils, for the right piece, are willing to move the 10th overall pick.
Yeah, like the Sens can't compete with that. The Sens cannot move number 7 for a goalie. They
No.
can't.
No, they can't.
Unless
move that
it would
pick.
have to come with an extension.
Right.
That's the
but even
only
then,
way possible. Even
and like
still,
a
I don't
low
love it.
risk. Like you can't be doing that for Markstrom. No chance. You can't be
And-
doing that
yeah.
for an Allmark even with an extension. I don't want a guy on the wrong side of 30. No.
All
not
mark
trading
with an
7th.
extension, I would consider.
7th? No. The Sens prospect pool needs a top end talent.
Yeah.
And they're only going to get that with a top pick. You can't keep trading them. 12th overall last year, 7th overall the year before. Just can't go back to that trade chatter around a pick. 25, sure, it can be in play, but as we saw, there's some players in that range
But
that would make they would be the Sens top prospect right now, whoever they draft at 25. That tells you where the prospect pool's at.
the difference would be the extension here. Like DeBrincat wasn't an extension. We thought the RFA blanket was going to keep us all warm and safe, and we weren't going to have to worry about that. That didn't go our way. Chychrun, although he had 3 years left on that deal, that's not necessarily the extension they're looking for here. So I don't think moving 7th overall is a possibility at all. But you look at the New Jersey Devils with number 10 in play. You look at all the prospects they have if they wanted to keep number 10 and move prospects instead. You look at teams like the LA Kings. They've got even much more assets than the Ottawa Senators. You look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've got more assets than the Ottawa Senators. And you could sell a goalie on being like, look, if you join this team, we're about a good goalie away from being able to make the playoffs or make a longer playoff push. And you could be a mentor to a guy like Joseph Woll. Like, there's just so many better opportunities for goalies if they get to a point where they have multiple options. The only way the Sens are going to get them is, I don't even know how the Sens would overpay to outmatch any of these teams. Like, I really think we're going to get into a situation where the Sens are going to try to find a cheap UFA and find lightning in a bottle, because they're going to have explored all their options and come up short, most likely.
Rumors continue, but really the pressure's on once the Stanley Cup playoffs end. Finals ongoing right now. We'll maybe touch on that a little bit later on in the week or on our Patreon show that you can check us out at. But we will continue following the NHL draft. We've got 3 great prospects, high-end talents, easily 3 guys that would be the top player on the Senators prospect pool list. And one of them in particular has been on the Senators pick at 25 in certain mock drafts around the world. So mock draft season is underway. We have scheduled our full first round mock draft. A lot of moving pieces with that, but you can expect it the Saturday before the draft. So you have a week to digest that. Lots more coming up. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You guys already know that FanDuel is the official online sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, and for a good reason. They're North America's #1 sportsbook. And you know, when it's summertime, that means baseball, NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, and more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit a home run out of the park. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Ross, I'm looking at the Stanley Cup Finals tonight's game, rather. You got the Edmonton Oilers trying to keep things going up against the Florida Panthers. They were the dominant team, but they still lost 3-0. So if you think, look, Edmonton's going to get it going this time, they're plus 116 money line. Or if you think the Florida Panthers can't possibly play that bad again and they're going to take advantage of home ice, you can get the Panthers at minus 140. So check it all out on FanDuel, guys, the official online sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. Nestled in the heart of the GLEBE Central Pub is always there for you. They're open until 2 a.m. every day. You can enjoy a cozy atmosphere, great service, and delicious food in a place that you can enjoy it your way with your friends, colleagues, or family. Everybody's always welcome. You can watch the games. All the Stanley Cup finals will be held at GLEBE Central Pub. You can catch some live music every Saturday night and even brush up on your trivia skills. We've got wing night on Mondays, taco day, daily beer specials. They've got you covered at the GLEBE Central Pub. The vibes are free at the GCP. There's always something happening at the GLEBE Central Pub. Go check out their website, glebecentralpub.com, and you can follow them on Instagram, GLEBE Central Pub. You can find the GLEBE Central Pub at 779 Bank Street. They're right in the heart of the Glebe, steps from Lansdowne. You're never too far away from the GLEBE Central Pub. Get there on a weekend. They've got the supporter for Arsenal. Lots going on. Always a great atmosphere at the GCP. So go check them out, 779 Bank Street. And oh yeah, let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. All right, Pillsy, before we get back to our draft rankings, just to wrap up that conversation, because there are lots of teams looking for goalies right now in the NHL. You already talked about two of the major players. We expect the New Jersey Devils to be that 10th overall, big prospect pool. They have the assets to make the required move, and their goaltending was not much better than the Sens last year. You've got the LA Kings. You can add the Toronto Maple Leafs to that mix as well. The team that will, I'm assuming, move on from Ilya Samsonov. They've got Joseph Woll on a cheap deal. So the Leafs would be a team. You got to think that there's some others out there too, like Columbus, Pittsburgh, where they have goalies that are signed to big money deals like Ottawa. But we can't say Ottawa's in the market for a goalie and not include these other teams that are almost trying to move their own goalies and replace them with someone better.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. There's a lot of teams in that situation. And yeah, thinking on it a little more, Ross, I'd take back my statement. I don't think number 7 should be in play for any player, even a goalie with an extension, because this year's draft class is just so good, and the Ottawa Senators need to bump things up here. So if anything, it's got to be Chychrun in 25th and something like that. But
that should get you, theoretically, that should get you a decent player.
Yeah, it honestly should. But like I mentioned with goalies, I have no clue how to value goalies in the trade market, because just when you think you got a handle on it, a trade comes out of left field here. And on Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts podcast, they were mentioning that the rumors around UC Saros probably not going to happen, that he gets moved. It sounds like both those sides want to get a deal done. So UC Saros might not be a guy that is even available, although there's 31 other teams that would love to have him.
What's really interesting about that, though, is Nashville has to make a decision then down the road, because they've got Yaroslav Askarov, who's starting to come into his own, and he only has 1 year left on his entry-level contract. So he'll be an RFA, and sure, you can run a tandem like that for a year or two. I think I'm just jealous of Nashville. They go from Rene to Saros and now potentially right to Askarov. Like,
yeah,
the Rangers going from Lundqvist to Shesterkin. Like, it's ridiculous. Ottawa went from Matt Murray to Eunice Korpisalo, a few pieces in between, but you get my point. Things haven't necessarily been smooth since Craig Anderson left the nation's capital. All right, coming in on our NHL draft rankings at number 20 from the USHL and the Chicago Steel, it's Michael Hage.
Yeah, Michael Hage, this guy puts up points, Ross. There's no debating that. In the USHL, like you mentioned, a Mississauga native. So we're seeing a trend, Ross, of Canadian kids choosing not to go to the CHL, but rather go the USHL college route. That's something to keep an eye on here as we move forward. But like I mentioned, puts up a lot of points. 54 games with the Chicago Steel, 33 goals, 42 assists, good for 75 points. So 75 points in 54 games. You got to love that. He had 4 points in 4 playoff games. He's committed to the University of Michigan. I'm a little cloudy on whether he's going to go there next year or the year after. I've heard kind of reports of both, so we'll see how that goes. But Ross, this is a guy with a lot of skill that I think maybe teams are a little bit down on because he did have a major shoulder surgery last season that only allowed him to play 13 games. And I think that stalled him from coming out of the gates flying. And it took him a little while. He had a much better second half of the season than he did first half. So that might have soured some scouts on him. But I think he has major upside.
Oh, offensively, when you watch his tape, like the hands stand out right away. He is a magician with the puck, great in transition. How many plays, Pills, he started either his own blue line or into his own zone, and then he's able to, boom, in the blink of an eye, he's speeding through neutral ice. And I think that he's going to be a huge hit wherever he goes because the fan base is going to get to watch him develop on a more steadier pace. And as you mentioned, missing as much time as he did, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for him to defer to Michigan 2025 fall. And we'll see what happens with that. But I can tell you, Scott Wheeler's higher than anyone else on him. 15th overall on Scott Wheeler's board, 17th on Chris Peters. Oh, I missed the 2 there. 12 on McKean's, 21 for Craig Button, 24 for Elite Prospects. And I always find it interesting when Bob McKenzie / what the NHL GMs think has him way lower than consensus. He's all the way down at 36 on Bob McKenzie's most recent list. Michael Hage is a 6'1", 188-pound center that shoots right and is, I'd say, transition's probably the number one area where he exceeds in his game.
Now, the one thing to consider, though, Ross, with Bob's ranking being as low as it is here, is that's the oldest ranking of all of these, right? Like, when's that Bob ranking from?
I can tell you in just a moment.
Because most of our other guys, like especially Wheeler, Pronman, EP, like these are very up-to-date rankings.
So Bob McKenzie put out a top 15 in May during the NHL Draft Lottery, but because Michael Hage is not in the top 15, he's somewhere below, but everything below that for Bob is from January.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Michael Hage, he had his best play after January. So I think that's you got to take that with a grain of salt because there's a reason why all these other scouts are so much higher than Bob, because Michael Hage had a huge end to his last year. In the highlights I watched, Ross, he's nicknamed the Viper from the broadcast crew over in Chicago. So that's a pretty cool nickname. He's excellent at entering the zone, like you mentioned. He can use his combination of speed, stick handling, and playmaking abilities. So you never really know how you can try to defend Michael Hage when he comes into the neutral zone and trying to get into the offensive zone. I really think this guy's got a good ceiling. Like, he's got a nice mid-range wrister as well. He's very creative with the puck. When you score 33 goals and have 42 points in 54 games, it shows you're a dual threat. So I just think there's a lot of different things to like about him.
And there's still some things to work on as well. Can kind of find himself maybe not attacking the net as much as some scouts would like, but I think you're going to find a two-way centerman here eventually once he gets into his own at the NHL level, but a hardworking guy who can skate. He's long, and his puck handling skills are exceptional. He himself in the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, they've got a quote from him saying he likes guys like Matthew Barzal and Jack Eichel because they're lengthy, they're long, and creative, can make plays. So he's a guy who's going out there every single shift. He's not looking to just make the safe play always. He's looking to make a play that can put his team at a huge advantage in the offensive zone. So I'm a huge fan of the player. I think if your team just drafted him, he's going to be I don't know if he's ever going to be like the top guy in a top 6, like on a line, but he can certainly, if he's got the right winger with him, I think that could be a deadly combo. If you maybe get a shooter with him, because he's going to open up so much space with his kind of flash and his ability to move with the puck. So I think if you put him with a shooter, you could really have a nice combination in a second line role at the NHL level.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he's a middle 6 projection. Like I mentioned, I really do think his injury kind of stunted his rise in the draft rankings here, as we're seeing from the recent rankings compared to the older ones here. I think he's got a really high ceiling. Ross, I like this player, but I don't think he's going to be in the Sens range. I think he's going to go in the late teens or early 20s. If the Sens are going to be interested in a guy like him, they're going to have to trade up, which I don't anticipate them doing.
He did undergo shoulder surgery, which is why he missed
Yep.
last season. We know that sometimes it takes even a little bit longer once you're back to feel the puck and get back to the level that you were before. So what's the amount of stars then?
So I got him at 3.5 stars.
Okay.
I think he's a good player. I think you're going to get a lot of upside with him, but I just don't think he's in the Sens proper range to take a true shot at him here.
Was not invited to Team Canada's U18s. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't know, Ross. I'm just going to chalk that up as just simply getting ousted by better players. Like I'm not looking at him and saying, all right, he wasn't good enough. I just think there was better players. And who knows, Ross, maybe this is a little bit of hockey politics being like, weird that you decided to go to the USHL, not stay in the CHL. We're going to take some of the CHL guys ahead of you here. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that could play a part. Who knows?
Well, we've seen that the other way for years. At the World Juniors for Team USA, they really lean towards their obviously USN TDP guys and their college guys before looking up to the OHL and other Canadian leagues. Michael Hage would be an awesome pick at 25, but like Pillsy said, I don't think he's a guy you trade up for with the talent around him. I think there's a lot of guys who are similar in terms of either upside or where they're at in terms of position, handedness, all that. But I do think that Michael Hage is going to make a team happy there in that 12 to 20 range, I think is when you're going to see him go off the board. Michael Hage with an average rank of 21.4 comes in at number 20 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings. All right, on the other side, still a pair of forwards. Big bodies can score. They're coming up next. You're listening to Locked On Sens. All right, a reminder that you can follow the show at Sens Central on Twitter. We are also on Instagram, lockedon.senators. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, so make sure to like, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend about Locked On Senators. All right, coming in at number 19 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings, it's Igor Chernyshov from Dynamo Moscow.
Yep, Chernyshov, this is a guy that has some good pro experience, Ross. You mentioned he's with Dynamo Moscow, and he played a good mix in the KHL and MHL. Actually, majority of his time was spent in the KHL, which you love to see in players' draft year. In 34 KHL games, only 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points, so kind of underwhelming there. But it's important to always contrast that with his MHL stats, went more similar to his peers rather than the KHL, because in the MHL, he dominated just like people thought he would. In 22 MHL games, 13 goals, 15 assists, good for 28 points, so more than a point per game guy, plus 15. So this is a kid that obviously it seems like he doesn't need to prove anything more in the MHL. That's why he was able to spend a lot of his time up in the pros in the KHL.
I'm a big fan of this player. 6'2", 192 pounds. One of the older players in the draft, born in November 2005. Bob McKenzie's got him 18 on his list, so right where we have him basically. And Elite Prospects has him at 19. That's where you can find him on Chris Peters' list. He's 18 with Corey Pronman, 22 for Craig Button, 23 for Scott Wheeler, and 30 for McKean. So one thing's for sure, he's a first-round pick, and the play against his own peers is what tells the tale, right? He hasn't been able to stand up on the international scale and do that because of obviously the situation with Russia, but Chernyshov should be dominating his age group, and he plays on such a team that dominates. This isn't a very even playing field in this league, and we know that Moscow is one of the teams that has money, and they're going to invest in their farm system as well, their MHL system, and that's where you get Chernyshov. So I wish that he was playing in a more projectable league, somewhere that you could really kind of put the numbers and say, okay, over a point per game. If it was the OHL or somewhere USHL even, it'd be a little bit easier to project. But I just worry because I'm watching some of these highlights and it's like the game is easy for him out there. So I'd like to see if we turn up the difficulty, what it could be. But if he could develop into a power forward type, I think that a team would be very happy to have him because, again, it is the NHL. It's a junior league in Russia. But in the 13 games that elite prospects tracked, he was like in the 99th percentile of defense, 97th percentile in offense. Like he made a mockery of the league. And Bills, you can only play in the league that you're put in. So that's where I'll stay with Chernyshov. That I am high on his upside. I just wish we could have been able to see it at a higher competition.
I mean, he played 34 games in the KHL, Ross. So
right. I'd like the in between.
Yeah,
I'd like the in between. That's where I'm at.
So we did get a good sample size of him playing up there. Now, I know you're looking at those 34 games, Ross, and you're saying 4 points. You don't know how you feel about that, but I got a spin zone for you here.
Oh,
I actually think that this was good for him because when you're dominating in the MHL, like you just went over, he clearly was. You start getting used to getting those points. You're playing an offensive game. You're able to dipsy doodle through other teams' defense. Everything looks easy for you. Okay, let's find out how the rest of your game is. So in the KHL, he had to really focus on his off-puck abilities. And that's what EP really hammers home about him is that he's so well-rounded now because he's not just one of those prospects that gets comfortable with the puck and comfortable dominating. He was really challenged in the KHL. So he said, okay, if I'm not able to score off the rush like I used to be, how else am I going to impact the game here? How else am I going to have the coach trust me to get ice time? Well, you got to be good defensively. You got to use that size that he has, that 6'2", 192-pound frame that he has to play off the puck. He finishes his checks. He's got a high motor. And Dylan Griffin from EP wrote a good article on him. I would ask everyone to go check that out. He does a lot of film clips, really nice breakdown. And he mentions that Chernyshov gets a lot of scoring chances off the rush, but doesn't necessarily capitalize on them. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a good shot. Like in the KHL, there's lots of good goalies, so he's still getting really good chances, even up in the pro leagues here. So I really think that you look at good size, good speed, good shot, good motor. All of these are very projectable skills when it comes to translating to the NHL. And I think next year, Ross, he's probably going to play full-time in the KHL, and he's probably going to have a little bit more of a carved-out role, especially now that the team and coach is more familiar with him at that level. So I think next year we could see the points. Certainly, I'm going to assume he's going to get more than 4 points in a full KHL season.
Industry chatter is one of my favorite parts of the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, and scouts have very mixed opinions about him. In May, an NHL scout told EP that he just doesn't see it with Chernyshov. Not fast enough, doesn't play heavy enough to be a power forward, but is he a checker? Is he a tweener? Says that they'll stay away. So he's on at least one team's do not draft because of that, just not being able to project what he could be at the next level in North America. I think that he does have a physical game from the clips that we saw. And I'm hopeful that that can translate because I think he'd be a fun player with some serious skills that could come over as soon as, the KHL contract ends and be a contributing top 9 member. I just think in this range, there's other guys who I think have more certainty in a top 6 upside. Whereas I think you might have less with Chernyshov. So he's going to be a little bit lower on my list compared to the guys who he's around where we have him at 19 on our rankings.
Yeah, that's fair, Ross. I think he's just such a high floor player. Like, I think it's pretty certain he will have the ability to play in the NHL, especially after probably 2 or 3 KHL seasons under his belt when he comes to North America. I've got him at 4 stars here. I like this player. I think he's got a lot of projectable skills, like I mentioned. So I think this would be a safe pick for the Ottawa Senators. However, you're dealing with the Russian factor here. You don't know how long he's going to spend over there. You don't know if he's going to want to come over here when the team wants him to come over here. All those things that go on, unfortunately, with that situation. And I also don't think he's going to be there at 25. I think there are going to be a handful of teams that like him and pick him much earlier. So that's the reason I've got him at 4 stars here. But I do like Chernyshov as a player. And if the Sens were to get him at 25, I wouldn't be upset.
No spoilers, but he's 26 on my list right now. So in the range, but even at 25, I'll guarantee I have at least one guy on my list who I would take ahead of Chernyshov. But a fun prospect development for Chernyshov ahead. I'm curious to see if he's able to produce in the AHL or in the NHL eventually, but in the KHL as recent as this upcoming season. I can tell you one thing for certain. He's 19th with an average of 21 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings. All right, coming in at number 18 on our 2024 Locked On Sens NHL draft rankings from the Windsor Spitfires, their captain, Liam Greentree.
Ross, the Windsor Spitfires, let's not brush over this. They were a rebuilding OHL team. And when I say a rebuilding OHL team, I really mean it. They had 18 wins in a 68-game season. So not a lot of gas in the tanks of those Spitfire planes as they spent most of the time on the ground. But Liam Greentree, he was able to elevate his game despite that. In 64 games, he had 36 goals, 54 assists, good for 90 points. So 90 points in 64 games on a terrible team certainly is impressive. You mentioned it. He's the captain of the Spitfires. He finished 24 points ahead of any other teammate. So he was the man down in Windsor, and he had 4 points in 7 U18 games. EP awarded him as the 3rd best power forward. So we just talked about Chernyshov there as the 4th best power forward. So Greentree's 1 step ahead of him. And they also gave him the 5th best vision award. So you look at a power forward with vision, Ross, and I like the term they have for Greentree. EP likes to refer to him as a power playmaker, not necessarily a power forward or a power sniper, but power playmaker. I like that.
That is a nice way to call Liam Greentree. Now, there's some concerns, but a lot to love about this player. Liam Greentree, you rang it off. The stats on a team that just wasn't great, having 90 points in 64 games. Super impressive. Enough so that Elite Prospects has him at 15th on their list. Bob McKenzie at 17. McKean's at 17. Wheeler at 18. Pronman at 23. Button at 25. And Peters all the way down at 31. He just clocked in at 6'3", 215 pounds. He's right wing, but shoots left. So a rare case where, a North American goes that direction. Played a diminished role. Wheeler saying that his pace wasn't able to keep up with the better teams at this spring's U18s. Still had 2 goals, 2 assists, but a disappointing overall U18s because at the pre-tournament, he was buzzing and everyone was kind of whispering, hey, look, Liam Greentree's on a good team now, surrounded by better players. No disrespect to his teammates in Windsor, but he should be able to produce more, and it wasn't the case. So I am going to be looking out for his pace as he develops as a prospect, but he's a highlight reel. Like, he comes in and for his size, he's able to maneuver the puck. He's got such great control and he gets to the dirty areas. So those are all things that I really like about Liam Greentree. And no spoilers, but we're at 18 on our list right now, and he's 18 on mine as well. He's the top player for me that we've already covered so far. And I just think that it's because of that size, skill, hope that we can get the speed up to that same echelon, maybe not as good as the vision and the hands and everything, but I think if his skating can improve a bit, he could be a 30-goal scorer at the NHL level.
You've got him ahead of EJ Emery?
I've got him ahead of EJ Emery.
Whew.
You thought
All
EJ was
right.
going to be number 1 on my list, eh?
I thought he was going to last at number 1 on your list a lot longer than this. So that's a big move here, Ross. And look, I certainly understand why you have him so high. He plays with so much confidence. He can set teammates up, or he can finish the job himself. He's got a great release as well. You certainly can't downplay that. And I like the way that EP talks about his playmaking. He's one of those guys that scans the ice and then he's able to quickly make those calculations in his head and is like, I know the best play. I know the most efficient way to get the puck into the zone, to set up my teammates. And clearly 90 points in 64 games when he had to be the guy. He's able to do that at a really high level. Now, you did mention as well, Ross, but it needs to be emphasized. The skating is the big issue here. Now, when you're 6'3", 215 pounds, no one expects you to really be Connor McDavid out there. But if you're going to be a guy that's going to continue to progress and play in the NHL, he's going to have to pick up his skating. EP's got him at 4.5 skating rate
on
here.
the 1-9 trail.
Yeah, interesting that they do a 1 to 9 rating. That's
scale, yeah.
That's certainly something I've never heard of. I wonder why you don't just go for the standard 1 to 10, but maybe because they're saying literally no prospect can have 10 out of 10 skills as it relates to the NHL level. But the skating really holds me back from Greentree, Ross. I've got him closer to the end of the first round. Right now, I've got him at 31 here, just because I'm really worried that when you're the top guy in Windsor, sure, you don't have the support from your teammates that you want, but you're put in all the best positions. And I don't want that to be such a knock on him, because it can be seen as a knock or elevating your point that he's such a good player. But I'm just so worried about the skating here, Ross, that it's got me a little bit or quite a bit lower actually than you on Greentree here.
Okay, and a Western Conference scout would agree with you, saying he isn't someone who scares the opposition, telling elite prospects, but says he's a complimentary player. And I'm okay with him being that, because this is not a target for the Sens at 7. This is at 25, and I think that they need some more complimentary players. I think this guy would be a great line mate for Tim Stützle. I think he would be a perfect kind of, skating aside, and Brady Tkachuk's not the most pretty skater in the world, but he gets around and he's also an elite playmaker. So I'm not saying Liam Greentree's Brady Tkachuk, but you don't need the elite skating as long as you're playing with a guy who's better at carrying the puck. And
Ross, look at Mark Stone, right?
There you go.
Cement in his boots, but thinks the game's at such a higher rate than most of his peers. That's Liam Greentree, right? Needs to work on that skating, but his hockey IQ alone may be able to completely erase the fact that he's a step or two behind competition.
Agreed. And Elite Prospects has him as shades of Matt Boldy, but one of the scouts quoted has him like a Rutger McGroarty, Colby Barlow type. So where you have all the tools, and guess what? Shelly Kettles, sign her up for a Liam Greentree skating session throughout the summer. And I think we will see Liam Greentree thrive in the National Hockey League. I'd take my bet on that for the 90-point man from the Windsor Spitfire. So if you have him that low, he's not a 4 or 5-star guy for you, because he's a 5-star guy for me at 25 for the Sens.
Who are your 5-star guys? Emery and him?
And Pilsy.
Solberg?
Stian Solberg.
Nice.
And I think I'm 4.5 to 5 stars. I leave the rating system for you. I'm more of like do I have him as a target at that pick? But I will say Sacha Boisvert is right up there for me too.
Yep, I like him too. I've got Greentree at 3.5 stars, Ross. I like the player. I think there is a lot to build on for him, and if he can work on the skating, I'll be impressed. Obviously, you don't get this opportunity, but I would love to see how next season works for him. You would think the Windsor Spitfires get a little more talent, and you want to see if he can replicate this. But as a scout in the draft, you don't get to wait till next year. Yeah, you don't get to do that. So obviously I'm saying that tongue in cheek. But look, if the Sens took him at 25, I'd be more than okay with that, because I do think there's a lot of potential here. But I would even say, Ross, I'm more inclined to look at guys like Ryder Ritchie, Cole Baudouin, Jet Lachenko. Like those guys, I think I would put ahead of Greentree, just because I think their skating is either up to par with everyone else or even better. So those are the types of players I have Greentree in the mix. So 3.5 stars for me.
With an average ranking of 20.9, Liam Greentree comes in at 18 on our Locked On Senators NHL Draft rankings. For more, go check us out on YouTube. All right, Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Yeah, final thoughts for me is it's been a great week for both of us, Ross. I'll leave your news up to you to share, but my news is I recently got engaged to my longtime girlfriend. Shout out Simone on our vacation in Utah. Also, shout out for everyone being patient. I know the internet at 10,000 feet above sea level isn't always the greatest, so thanks for everyone for bearing with us through our vacation here.
Pixelated Pillsy, you were getting called.
Pixelated Pillsy. Yeah, so I do apologize for that. I was told the internet was a lot better there. I didn't think it was going to be an issue.
Audio was clean, though.
Audio is clean, which, I mean, anyone that knows me, I got a face for radio and a radio voice. So as long as my voice was good, that's all that matters here. But yeah, big week for me. I'm super stoked about it. And I'll hand the floor over to you, Ross, because big week for you as well.
Well, first comes love, then comes marriage.
Yeah, there you go.
Then comes the baby and the baby carriage. But yeah, still a long way to go, but we're really excited. We're gonna have a baby girl. So big week for the Locked On Senators, guys. And to say I timed it well, not too close to Christmas, also not too close to the home opener. It's kind of as good as it gets. No, obviously, wife's doing well, and we're super excited for all this. Another Sens fan, so we're slowly but steadily closing the gap between Sens fans and Leaf fans in Canada. So just doing our part. But yeah, Pillsy, great week for us. And we're going to have a great couple weeks of content coming up. We've ordered our lapel mics. We will be ready to rock and roll from Las Vegas, June 28th, 29th, first round and the second. Wait, can we talk about this final thoughts? I know we don't do Firefest or anything. Shout out to PMT, but the second round of the NHL draft starts at 8:30 local time after night one, round one.
That should be illegal, Ross. Like, no events in Vegas should start before noon.
I know.
Like, that is because, Ross, you and I are going to go and celebrate the amazing players that the Ottawa Senators take at picks 7 and 25 after round one. We're going to be bumping elbows with NHL execs, scouts from all over the league. So we're going to be having a good night. And then we got to roll out of bed at like 8 o'clock in the morning to make it back for the second, to the start of the second round. That's going to be tough.
Oh, we'll battle for the citizens. We will do just that. For today, we say goodbye. Thanks so much for liking, watching, listening, subscribing to the show. It does go a long way to help us out. For more, check us out on YouTube, and you can find us on Twitter, Sens Central, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.